Much more has been learned about stadium architecture and the movement of fans. Concourses, ramps, elevators, steps, and stairs all have their place.
Stairs are a challenge for anyone, particularly the taller the stadium and the more stairs that you'd have to go up and down. So a ramp that can be accessed by a wheelchair, a ramp can be accessed by a gator or a small vehicle to get emergency equipment and supplies up. Certainly, escalators and people movers like elevators have their advantages and disadvantages, and they can be worked into the solution, but for the most part it seems that ramps are the optimum way to move people.
The nature of competitive events compels fans to participate emotionally with the teams and players. When that compulsion takes physical form, as in rushing the field or harassing opponent teams as they enter or leave the field, countermeasures must be considered.
It's very important to keep the spectators from the field, and from a design standpoint, a lot of times that happens through some kind of vertical separation. In other words, the stands don't come all the way down to the field, they'll stop short and there will be a wall or a separation point with a railing above, and that's what we have at Beaver Stadium. So there are very limited access points. We have a tunnel for the home team, a tunnel for the visiting team, and just a handful of other access points that are then manned. We certainly have security folks at all of those entrance and portals checking credentials to make sure that field access is only maintained by those who really should be getting field access.
At Autzen Stadium is a real challenge. We have a tradition of the fans being on the field. Prior to expansion, they actually entered the field to access their seats. So there was a sense of entitlement, a sense of tradition of having field access. When we renovated the stadium, we created a moat on one side of the stadium, which created a buffer between the fans and the field, making it much harder for them to rush the field post-game. Fortunately, this was not created on the other side. Subsequently, we are dealing with changing a culture and not really having design to assist us.
Well, one thing you should consider is not putting bleacher seats around the field. Oftentimes venues will add additional seats to increase the capacity of their venue. We took those seats out, and actually they eliminated the track that was around the field, so that did eliminate the seats, and that raised the level of the front row seats to the field level to 14 feet.
We've had incidents where an official has fallen to the ground, has been pushed over by the Russia people. It's not malicious, they just want to be where they want to be. We had a coach's wife who was pushed down onto the ground.
Tonight we had someone actually push the CMS worker down the stairs and then take off, and we ended up catching them. So those are kind of the things that happen in a game like this. We've had some serious fights with drunk fans, and night games tend to be worse because people sit and party all day and get drunk, and by the time the game starts, they're really hammered.
Last week we had a gentleman who jumped the wall and snapped his ankle, 16-year-old, whose parents had been encouraging him to go over the wall. It's one of the biggest cultural things we face is parents encouraging the kids to go down onto the field without thinking about the consequences.
I would recommend not putting any type of fencing or barriers. That becomes too dangerous. At Ohio State, we tried that a few years ago using the bicycle rack type of barricades and locking them together. But what that caused is several thousand people, they knocked the temporary barricades over, and then it becomes a trip hazard. Even with our renovated stadium and the fact you got to drop somewhere between 6 and 14 feet, people still rush the field. So it's still going to happen, at least in our venue.
The reality is there's always a potential that your fans are going to rush the field, and items like fencing or hard barriers like that could be very dangerous if there were a field rush with people getting pinned against those types of barriers.
After the first game this season was our first attempt to really curb this impulse to go jump on the field. We focused the cameras on certain areas and then pulled that footage and took a look at what happened and kind of helped us to determine how we could improve our response to these issues.
One unique way of doing things is using bushes, shrubbery, landscaping materials in the place of railings, because when someone sees a railing they can jump over it, jump on the field, make access to the field. They can see how far the drop is. When you're using a bush, flowers, things of that nature, they look at it and they don't see the bottom. So it will, give you that sense that you don't know where you're jumping into. So that would help in preventing. Also limiting the gates, the number of gates that you have accessing the field would also help.
I think considering where the visiting team tunnel and the visiting team access occurs in the venue is crucial as well. One of the major modifications we made in our stadium in the past few years was improving the access way for our visiting team, because it was a very rough gauntlet for them to walk through, both entering the field and leaving it at halftime or returning. And so we made significant improvements to try to provide some level of separation from the general patron. Essentially, an access way to the field is cut into the bowl, and so there's a separation, and you can have fans that line that entranceway, but by design it's critical to keep them safe. And so oftentimes, although this isn't how it is at Beaver Stadium, the visiting team locker room is oftentimes in a very secluded area, very close to the field, and not well advertised.
In addition to security concerns, modern stadium design must take into account infrastructure considerations such as electricity, drainage, and other hydrology issues.
So one of the design features that were incorporated that's very beneficial for the flexibility of the stadium is lighting controls and building controls. We can isolate which floors or which areas are lit, both exterior and interior. We can obviously control the temperatures interior and exterior based upon that. And access, the elevators can be turned on and off depending on where we want people to go.
We look at being able to provide a safe environment. Lighting is not conducive to criminal type activity. It makes people feel much safer when they're in a well-lit area, less likely for a lot of maybe minor crimes or even some major crimes to occur in a well-lit area. So it's very important that not only aesthetically is your lighting going to be pleasing, but it provides that dual purpose for providing a safer environment for the fans.
It's important to think about emergency lighting. So you want to have adequate lighting. If you have night games and the power were to fail, you want to make sure your generators provide enough lighting inside the stadium, but also outside the stadium, so as people leave, it's important that they can see where they're going. So we have to have lighting in and around the stadium, both for emergency power to make sure people can leave safely.
Design considerations for utilities have to do with redundancy, so there's backup power, so forth, shut-off valves for all of the utilities, and meters so that you can accurately read your utility usage.
Our primary concern with utilities for our venue consists of eliminating a single point of failure. So we want to be able to have multiple ways to bring water, multiple ways to have power coming into the stadium, and if there were to be a failure on either side of that, we want a way to be able to either reroute the water or a generator that's capable of sustaining a minimal amount of electric needs that we would need to function at the stadium.
Well, I think one of the most important things is redundancy. We currently have that from an electrical standpoint. Actually, we have triple redundancy. We get city power, and we also have a power plant on campus. And on top of that, we have generator backup that supplies emergency power in the case of both of those failures.
We have multiple generators in the stadium, and then we test them before a night game or once a year before a night game to make sure everything's still functioning as it's planned, and make sure the PA system is still functioning on generator power, the ribbon boards are working to provide the light, and then we go around and test and determine what lights didn't come on and fix that problem before the night game.
Critical considerations having to do with drainage in the stadium have to do with the annual rainfall you get in the region. It also has to do with the 100-year floodplain levels that you need to consider, and also just cleaning of the stadium. You need to be able to clean as you power wash pre and post season.
It's unique to our area because we sit in a bowl. We're also in an old creek where they built the stadium. Drainage is important not just for the stadium but the area around the stadium because it could compromise pathways that walk into the stadium. It can also compromise the access to the stadium or egress for emergency exits as well as vehicles. It's important so we can keep the event going. If a rainstorm happens overnight, it allows the proper drainage and allows the facility to get up and running quickly without having to look at the water issues. We created a large drain pipe that's under the field. It's about 4 feet in diameter that gets pushed out. Having additional pumps, backup pumps, retention ponds that are located off-site or located down from the facility to allow you to send some water. If it can't drain off into the creek or into the river quickly, it goes to another area that you can hold it until it can be pumped off.
We have a state-of-the-art drainage system that's on all of our grass fields that'll drain up to 5-inch per hour rainfall, which is a very heavy rainfall. The other thing is being able to drain the water away from the spectator base. It can't all collect into one area, so multiple areas of drainage I think are important.
Our stadium was built in 1922, and then over the years there were some minor renovations, but between 2000 and 2002 football seasons there was a major renovation to the stadium, and part of that renovation was lowering the playing field by 14 feet, and that put it below the water level of the river that's just adjacent to the stadium. So they installed pumps to keep the venue basically from flooding. And thinking about embracing technology, they designed a system that would send, if the pumps fail, it actually sends a cellular phone signal to the facility's operations alerting them that the pumps have quit working. So you should always think futuristically about how can you embrace technology in the design. So that should be a forethought and not an afterthought.
We've had some issues with drainage at Beaver Stadium through settlement of pipes and things, and so I would say that it's obviously critical to drain to some collection points. In fact, we've been doing this significantly at Beaver Stadium through renovation over the past few years to reduce the amount of flow that comes down to the bottom level and to collect that and to bring it to stormwater drains that carry off to a remote site. Without that ability to control and maintain the drainage, what occurs, at least in central Pennsylvania, is that you can develop sinkholes. And if you do that in and around a structure, it can be a very significant structural problem for us.
Even in the post-9/11 era, weather is the primary consideration for fan safety. Lightning, strong winds, hail, and tornadoes. No staff is more aware of that factor than that of the University of Alabama. Their community was devastated by a twister that came a few blocks from their stadium.
The pan is near the stadium, and again, we're going to get in very heavy rain here. And again, look at the rain streaming, the inflow streaming into that large tornado.
The tornado had a significant impact. Everybody is hypersensitive to severe weather now, at least for the next few years. So what we had to do was come back and design a shelter plan for all the tailgaters across campus. So that was over 100 to 150,000 people. We have to consider where we might shelter them before the game, during the game, and after the game. So we have plans in place to open buildings and occupy buildings and to direct people to these locations in the event that we have severe weather that comes through campus.
Another big factor, you look at Katrina, which affected us directly, in Hattiesburg and New Orleans area in Mississippi. Many best practices have come out of weather-related incidents that might affect people's safety at events.
Threatening weather, when it occurs unexpectedly, requires shelter areas within the stadium or crowd relocation. These are elements that must be intentionally incorporated into stadium design.
One of the consequences of our design at Autzen Stadium has to do with the underside of the seating bowl. It rises up, but on the back side of it, it provides safe shelter for inclement weather. It also incorporates our concession stands and our restrooms, but it does become a nice assembly space when fans are trying to get out of the weather.
Oftentimes, stairwells are covered and can provide that shelter that they need for that limited time.
Well, we'd like to see a mostly enclosed area that will host a lot of people, influence people to get out of the stands but don't have to push them all the way out of the stadium, don't have to push them all the way to ground level. But on the same By the same token, we don't want to create such an enclosed place that a fire breakout would entrap smoke, and so all that has to be factored in by the architect.
Planning and designing for electronic technology is like tracking a moving target. Methods, programs, and communications devices change frequently, but there are practical design measures that can allow for that change. Let's look at some examples of the way control centers, cameras, and cooperation play a practical role in stadium security.
It's critical when you're looking at the infrastructure that you have a nice investment in that in the beginning. It's very difficult without having that robust infrastructure to be able to support not only the entertainment needs, but the potential emergency needs that you're going to have if some type of an emergency does occur.
We have to have a command center to manage all the resources that are going on in game day. We have multiple centers, really. We have one primary, and then we have some support centers and then a backup site.
One thing you need to look at is having the capability for communications within the facility, and that's going all the way down to the locker rooms up to the top of the stadium, which may require you to put additional communications cables in or antennas to increase the sound. Intercoms, PAs are essential, especially not just in the center bowl or where you have the event in the football stadium. You want to have them in the rooms that someone may not be able to hear the announcer.
This is our stadium operations and security room. We staff this up for game day command center, if you will. We have 2 rows of seats. The front row is all of our emergency services. So we have city police, we have university police, as well as city, EMS, and the Red Cross, who all have staff within the stadium. The upper row is staffed primarily by athletic department staff, including our facilities, our information technology, events. We have the fire panel on the wall, so we are monitoring the fire alarm system for the stadium from here. But we also use this position to do a lot of the inputting for what we call our base camp system.
One of the things that we've been working on campus is ways to realize real-time data so that as responders are responding to something in the stadium, everybody can see it. And that's where the new software that we're using allows both for responders to message on an incident as it happens, state what they're doing in that response. So if we have a Red Cross Ready team show up and there's a patient on the ground, they can give that initial assessment. It's logged into the system. We know where spatially they are within the facility, and then the other responders can respond to that, meaning that fire EMS can say they're on site, where they're at, when they'll be there. And we're also able then to log the patient transition so that we're not losing somebody between kind of the Red Cross Ready teams or fire EMS and then transport.
So for instance, the fire and EMS responded to it, Red Cross responded to it, Red Cross was cleared first, EMS was getting ready to transport the individual to University District Hospital, and then the patient refused, and so that was the end of that report.
Cameras play an ever-increasing role in stadium security and incident management. There are many considerations, some of which are not obvious at first glance.
I have a very good friend who consistently says that closed circuit is the best way to multiply. He calls it a force multiplier. It basically allows you to have eyes on multiple locations at the same time.
When Autzen was first expanded in 2001, we installed a 9-camera system. This was pretty exciting for us because we didn't have any cameras prior to that. They were all point tilt zoom. They were in some key locations and really assisted us with, especially with first responders going into sections, helping guiding them to the issues. A couple of years later, we expanded that with a grant from Homeland Security, but we chose fixed cameras in the areas that were not covered by the original installation. What we found is those are not as useful to us, that being able to track people, track incidences, requires the ability to move your camera to follow people. And so if we were to do it all over again, I think we'd do all point tilt zoom cameras throughout the stadium.
Ideally, you'd want them to be, pan, tilt, and zoom. And ideally, you would like them to be HD because the quality is so much better and you can get information. In an ideal world, you would also like them to have low light capability so that if there are places in your stadium that it's a night game and there are dark places, which there probably are, they can still come up with a good image.
I think we have 50 to 60 cameras in our bowl. I have the ability to watch traffic as it's coming in, to look at the lots, If we have an incident in the lot, if we have a heart attack or somebody goes down or a party that's out of control, we have the ability to take a camera, pan in, and zoom right into to what's happening there. We send resources there, we observe what occurs. All of that documentation is very helpful to us. There are software packages and very simple models that will allow a 3D mock-up of the facility. And you can actually look from the camera position and look at any conflicts that may occur through columns or beams or other structural elements. So you can move or focus on where that camera's best position is. So in the design of a new facility, those capabilities are definitely beneficial.
Cameras are not only for security purposes, they also allow you to evaluate your design of your structure as to the flows and to pick up any of the errors or any of the issues that may have come by the different construction and different design methods for pathways and for access to and from your venue.
There are megapixel cameras now that can be knitted together. So we're looking to put in a system of 4 cameras that will be knitted together and show us 365-degree view of our bowl. With these high resolution cameras, different folks will be able to look and zoom in on different aspects of the same camera, which the footage will all be recorded. But what they're looking at in a zoomed in area might be trying to check an event, an incident that's occurring out in the bowl, or maybe they see something that they want to just get a better sense to collect evidence or documentation. You know, all of those advances are just very beneficial to us.
In the post 9/11 era, feedback from fans and other observers becomes critical. Remember our old friend, the 12th man? Well, he or she plays a crucial role in stadium security. Technology has made fan input more feasible, but there are challenges as well.
So we have a AgAssist, which is a fan texting methodology where if there are issues inside the stadium, anything from there could be a spill on a concourse or fan violence or disturbances inside the stadium, we're trying to let them know that they can contact us. It'll go to our command center as well as our game manager's booth so that we can address those things, and it's an anonymous way for them to let us know that we have issues we have to deal with.
One of the problems that we found is with the increase in technology, there were a limited amount of cell towers that were available, an increase in cell phone usage, an increase in people with data usage for the phones. So our infrastructure is a lot of times overwhelmed, especially when there's a big play that happens or when there's a break either at the quarter or especially at halftime. So this year the university's put in a number of relays, additional towers, mobile towers to be able to support the number of people that are inside the stadium and still allow us to have those emergency functions that we need in the event that we're having a medical emergencies or other emergencies that could potentially occur at the venue.
Our challenge in a smaller market is the infrastructure provided by the cellular providers cannot keep up with 60,000 people being in one place at one time, all using their iPhones. So analyzing what the cellular providers can provide for you is very important. However, it's not always a great idea to immediately go to a public Wi-Fi system, at least not in our case.
We needed a backup. What the Athletics have done is they brought in a cell on wheels and actually put a tower right near the stadium to help with that surge.
Television, radio, print media, streaming video, blogs, tweets, and internet postings of all kinds have become the norm in modern sports communications. The proliferation of media in recent decades necessitates more space and more planning.
When considering IT needs in a design, these days you can never have too much. We've just expanded our photographer area from about 24 to 48 portals for photographers to upload their photos.
The requirements for the media locations are wireless access, internet access, because they all need to file a story, plus monitoring systems for the action, whether it's big screen or whether it's on TV, so that they can fulfill their needs to file stories and or upload pictures and have them sent off to the different locations.
A lot of them may want a separate room so they can write their story. A lot of our people write their story as the game's going on or the facility's being used, and they want to publish it. They want to be the first one out there, so that they need a quiet area or they need an area that they can upload their story and send it in.